Well, welcome everyone to today's episode of TMI Advice You Didn't Want. Today I feel like this is going to be a fun topic. Like whenever we were like, what do we talk about? I was like, ooh, this is going to be fun. Even though I don't have a lot of knowledge on it, but I'm like, this is still going to be fun. Probably really fun for you too, Ashley. But my name is Karen. I am one of your hosts here.
And my name is Ashley. And yeah, I'm excited to talk about it too. And really, I think no one really knows at the end of the
Right.
day. Like anytime I talk to people about like what they're doing with their kids or what's the best thing to do with kids, I'll call up mom or I'll call up friends or like just talk to different like counselors or other energy workers. And no one really knows.
Yeah. So, I mean, the topic is personal development for kids. And
Yeah.
listen, guys, I don't have kids, but I do have two nieces. And I kind of am
Mhm.
like, ooh, like this is going to be like, this is good. Like, I don't
Yeah.
care what age you are. I feel like personal
Mhm.
development is incredibly important. But when you kind of
Yeah.
like add in that kid element, like it really
Mhm.
like this, I wish that I had a lot of the knowledge that I do now because my life would have been totally
Mhm.
different. And not that
Yeah.
it hasn't been a great life, but I think just the whole thought processes would be
Yeah.
totally different.
Oh, for sure. I've had like those kind of conversations with my friends who we grew up so differently. And now like I wasn't raised in a Christian home, but I was Christian. I have friends that were very traditional Christian. I know you were as
Hmm.
well. And we talk about spirituality and positivity and all that kind of stuff. And they see me do that with the kids. And they're like, oh man, like I can't even imagine what my life would be like now had I been raised the way that you're raising the kids.
Yeah.
And so like they're still kids at the end of the day, like they still have their wonderful moments. But it makes a massive difference for sure. So
Yeah, absolutely. And like the thing is like I started my personal development journey 9 years ago. So I was pretty young. I was probably like 28 when I first started my
mhm.
personal development journey. So that's not like super duper old, but like the thing is when you're young and you're developing your brain waves, you're so much more susceptible to
Yeah.
new thoughts and ideas because you haven't pretty much been like, oh, this is the way the world works, right? So by the
Mhm.
time we hit the age of 35, unless we're changing our thought processes, unless we're actively working on creating change, about
Yeah.
95 or 90 to 95% of our thoughts are the same thoughts that we had yesterday by the time
Mhm.
we hit age 35. So like it's like you're living on autopilot. So, what if you could live on autopilot in thoughts that actually served you instead of living
Yeah.
on autopilot in thoughts that are detrimental to you?
Yeah.
Like,
For
holy
sure.
crap, what a life.
Yeah.
So, what are the things that you're doing or you're even planning on, like things
Mhm.
that you're planning on doing with the kids to help with their personal development and their mindset and their thoughts?
Yeah, so they're my stepkids, which you know, but not everyone listening knows. And so when I was introduced to them, I believe they were 5, 6, and 2. So they're very young, around that age where their minds are very malleable. And they were sad and sick.
Mm,
Like you would just look at them and you just felt sad and sick. Like that
yeah,
they looked exhausted.
yeah.
And I like fell in love with them, but it's just when I look back at pictures, it's like, holy cow, they're completely different kids.
Mm.
Even my mom was talking to me about it the other day because I was telling her how one of our friends who's grown up around the kids are like, it's crazy how much they've changed and how fast they changed when you entered their life. And it's not because of me, it's because of the things I taught them. Like it's because of the affirmations and the positivity and the spiritual growth and all that kind of stuff that I gave to them and introduced into their lives. And they say like they've grown so much and they can tell when they're with me. And like the especially my middle son Atticus, who he was when I first met him, and who he is today is like a completely different kid.
Mm.
And my mom was saying, to go back to that, she's like, he was so sad and so miserable that you didn't even want to be around him. And
Mm.
he was a 5-year-old.
That's
And like,
sad.
I know she'd feel bad if he ever knew that or heard that. But that was how, like, that was the energy he gave off, because
Mm.
he was that sad. Like,
Mm.
so anyways, so I looked at these kids and didn't really know what to do. I basically, I feel like you get time to prep with how to raise kids as you're pregnant and as they're
Right.
newborns, all that kind of stuff.
You're
And
like, I didn't get
um
that.
I went on a dating app to like meet friends and had no real intention on a long-term relationship, let alone
Yeah.
a family.
Right. Surprise.
So yeah, it was like, whoa, okay, what am I gonna do? For me, thankfully, I credit network marketing to being able to be as good of a parent as I was, as fast as I was, with
Mm.
like no kids other than my nieces as well previous to that, because there's so many network marketer mentors that would talk about the things that they do with their kids.
Yeah.
And I would talk, like, that was always people's like why, their reason for doing network marketing, was to be able to be home with their kids and invest in their kids. And so you'd hear those kind of testimonials all the time. And so I started picking things that I had heard in network marketing when at the time it was not relevant to me. And then hearing it so
And
much, I
then it
was able to
was.
dive in. So one of the things that one of my mentors did was he would tell his kids 10 things he loves about them
Mm.
every single night.
I
And so,
love that you do that, by the way. You've told me that before, and I feel like that is like mind-blowingly changing for any child to be able to
yeah,
verbalize that. That's huge.
yeah.
So,
And we always make sure that we do something that's like about their personality, like you're kind, you're patient, like, those kind of things.
yeah.
And like we will do things like we enjoyed or we loved dirt biking with you or something like that. Or we loved how brave you were when you were afraid to jump off a platform into a swimming pool. So we'll say things like that that are based off of behavior occasionally, but usually it's about like core
Them.
personality.
Yeah.
And that just builds so much confidence and self-confidence, especially in a young child,
Mm.
where they don't have a conscious or subconscious mind. It's all one. And so we started doing that probably when I was about 3 months into their life. And so every night we would do what we love about them. And sometimes they do it back, sometimes they don't. They like will not go to
Yeah.
bed until we've done it. Like if me and Derek have already kind of sat down and are watching a show and the kids are playing a game, and then we say, okay, time to clean up, it's bedtime. They start cleaning up. They're like, you're gonna come tell us what you love about us, right? And I'm like,
That's
yes.
cute.
Have
Yeah.
we ever forgotten
Yeah.
in the last like 4 years?
That's
No.
cute.
Yeah, so yeah, they need it, like they like it fills their cup so much. That was the biggest thing, and that's like the most consistent thing. Like we
Mm.
always do it. If like
Mhm.
one of us is out and not home, we will call and tell them, or like voice message over Facebook Messenger or whatever it is. Like it always happens. And so that's the biggest thing. And I've noticed the biggest difference in them. And it's so cute too, especially when Knox was 2 years old and he would say what he loves about you. And
Cute. Yeah.
sometimes he says what he loves about his life. And it's like, whatever it is. And so it's kind of like a grateful thing too.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Well,
that's
not
huge.
not only the grateful, but like
Mhm.
you're allowing them to accept compliments also.
That's true. Yeah.
That is really difficult for grown human beings to do. And I feel
Yeah.
like when you sit down with them every day and their brains right before they fall asleep, just like our brains are more
Mhm.
susceptible and open to those compliments. And we're
Yeah.
more open to accept things like that. That's the reason you
Mhm.
should not watch TV right before bed, because you're really programming your brain. But anyways,
Yeah.
I digress. But I
Yeah.
love that you're doing that with them, because it is instilling that
Mhm.
okay, I can accept compliments and it's not going to either make me look arrogant to accept it, or I'm not going to have a low self esteem. I'm going to feel confident as I go
Yeah.
through life and people tell me things, because they're going
Mhm.
to. They're going to compliment you on how you look, how you do
Yeah.
things, what kind of talents you have. And they're going
Mhm.
to be more open to accepting that and going, you know
Yeah.
what, I did do a good job, and be
Mhm.
okay with that, because so many of
Yeah.
us struggle with that. So I love that
Mhm.
you do that. So huge.
Yeah. Well, I heard something too, this is kind of on topic with it, that narcissists are born by saying, like, you look good, you're so smart, you're those things.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you attribute them to having like the best, like you're the smartest, you're the most athletic, that's how narcissists can be born, even though we're not actually doing anything negative, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's through overpraising them. And so the more effective way is to say, like, you did something that was hard even when you didn't want to.
Mm.
You were brave, you were very scared of that thing, but you worked through that and you were brave anyways. um I love how hard you concentrated. I love how you do hard things, like that kind of thing. And they
Yeah.
say that's more effective to raising a self-confident kid versus a narcissistic kid.
Yeah. I mean,
So,
because it can at times come off as
mhm.
narcissistic. It can come off
Yeah,
as, oh, they're just arrogant. But
yeah,
the question is, too, like when I'm looking at somebody and I'm going, are they arrogant or are they just really confident? I ask, are they able to accept criticism as well? Like that's another
yeah,
piece of the puzzle.
mhm.
And do they think about other people first? Like, not
Yeah,
first, but do
for
they
sure.
think about other
Yeah,
people? Like, are they
yeah,
considering them in their
mhm,
thought processes? So I think when you add all of that together, you've
mhm,
created a self confident human being that can go
mhm,
out and create more self
mhm.
confidence in the world. Because here's the
Yeah,
thing, like, the world that we see is literally like what's going on inside,
yeah,
what we've created inside. So
yeah,
you create a self-confident human being, you're going to create a self-confident world, like
mhm.
in a
Yeah,
beautiful way, that people are like,
yeah,
man, yeah, I do have so much to offer this world, I do have so much to give. And it just, I don't know, it just creates so much beautiful that we need in this world. So
yeah.
yeah.
Another really cool tool that we do, not as consistently, but they're cards, they're affirmation cards. I think they're power cards is what they're called. And I got them from Indigo, and they're for kids. And so it says like, I am powerful.
Mm,
And then it says words that are like powerful. And then it says, when was a time today that I felt powerful?
mm-hmm.
And so it's getting them to think of like positive things and reaffirm positive things. So it's like brave, beautiful, light, love, like all those kind of things. So that's something that I find to be a really cool tool. Um, as you were talking, the other big thing is we've taught them to think for themselves.
Yeah.
And it's a hard one because
Yeah.
you know we want to have our rules, but then we also want to teach children to think for
Yeah.
themselves. And in their situation, with co-parenting and everything like that, it's even more important. And so we tell them too that we make mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's also so powerful. Like, I can't even imagine how much it would have changed my life in a positive way if my parents say, like, I make mistakes and I'm sorry,
I
you know?
agree. Yeah, yeah.
So,
I think a lot of the older generation, like my parents are boomers and I think yours are too,
mhm,
that it was very difficult for them to say that to their kids. Like that
mhm,
wasn't a part of the culture. And I do think that that's massively changed since then,
yeah,
because I think a lot of like Gen Xers and then millennials and now the Gen Z, like that we're
yeah,
realizing how helpful it is to admit to kids, oh yeah, I
mhm,
really messed up.
yeah,
So I love that you do
yeah.
that too.
Yeah, and we say like with the whole learning how to think, we say like your parents, like you have three parents, we don't always make the right choice.
Mm.
We make mistakes. What we say isn't always the most effective thing for you, because we're human. And your grandparents, same thing. Your friends, your strangers on the street, your teachers, and we just go through everything. We say at the end of the day, you don't have to follow through if we tell you what to do, you or a teacher tells you what to do, you can stand up for yourself and say no. Just make sure you have a reason why and you're being kind.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Whoo, fine line there. And that's
Yeah.
probably difficult. I can't imagine trying to teach that to a kid. Like I'm sure
Yeah.
that you've got your work cut out for you with that one.
Well, and then too, I'm like, well, at the same time, there is a time and place where being kind isn't necessary. There are times where you have to speak your truth in a way that isn't kind because that's what you have to do. And I've been in that situation before where I have said things that weren't kind, and I'm like, I don't regret them because they were my truth and they needed to be said. um
Yeah, the
and
biggest
so
question is when you actually speak your truth like that, are you continuing to feel a certain
yeah.
way after having the conversation? Like a lot of
Mhm.
people, like I've done this too. Like you
Yeah.
ruminate on the conversation. You're like, "Oh, I should have said this too. Oh, I should have." And then
Mhm.
you're then creating
Yeah.
a negative space. But if you can speak your truth and like
Mhm.
this is literally how I felt, this is what was going
Yeah.
on,
Yeah.
and then releasing that energy and letting it go, then yeah, there's
Yeah.
so much wonderfulness that comes from that too, for sure.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, like one of my mentors, my Reiki master, your mentor, who's in her 80s, she says sometimes you just have to tell people to fuck off. And
did she say
she's
that word to
all,
you?
yes.
Oh, wow, that's a big deal. Like this lady, I don't know, have I ever heard her cuss? I don't think I have, which is funny
Yeah.
because you and I are both like, fuck this, fuck
Yeah. Yeah,
that.
but she's all about like love and light and not
Yeah.
feeling angry and all that kind of stuff. And she's like, sometimes you just have to do that. And I'm like, it's true. Like the kids are going to come up against bullies where they're going to have to tell a bully to fuck off. In those kind of situations, it's not really about being kind. And so I haven't got to that part yet of how to teach them like that. It's just like right now we're going to focus on like saying what you need to say.
Yeah.
And there's a funny story with this is so I used to teach swimming lessons, and um my I taught my kids how to swim very early, like basically as soon as I met them. We lived at the pool and I taught them how to swim. And at their other home they would have to wear life jackets, and still to this day my 5-year-old wears a life jacket at his other home, and he's been able to swim better than his older brother since he was 2. Like we would race and he would
Mm.
swim better and faster than his 5-year-old at the time brother. And so my daughter hates wearing her life jacket at the time. She doesn't have to anymore there. And so she complained about it often. And I said, you know what? This falls into the you don't always have to listen, but you have to have a reason,
Mm.
and you have to know that there might be consequences,
Mm-hmm.
because stuff that you do at our home might get consequences that you don't get at the other home and vice versa, and at school and all that kind of stuff. Like our kids are allowed to swear in our home, but they know if they swear at school they'll never be swearing at our home again.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah. And
um like
and
things like
that
that.
that is something like I remember growing up. If
Mhm.
I had said a bad word, like I would have gotten in huge trouble, right? Like
Yeah.
that was not okay. But I
Yeah.
look at how detrimental that
Mhm.
was to my mindset because
Mhm.
now I created like these words are bad. Like I can't
Yeah.
say them. And so
Mhm.
for years, I remember being like, I was like well into my 20s and I was like, I don't like the F word. Like, I don't like it. And then
Yeah.
finally I was like, it's just a fucking word. Like, how am I using it? Right? Like,
Yeah.
that is what I would want to teach kids. Like, how
Mhm.
are you using it? Are you
Yeah.
using it appropriately? Because nobody
Mhm.
wants to listen to you just cuss all day long and that's the only thing
Yeah.
that comes out of your mouth.
Yeah.
But if you're using it appropriately,
Mhm.
then that makes more sense. And like my husband and I, like we don't want kids, but we've talked about if we had kids, we would want to teach them how to be appropriate with the words that they use
Yeah.
instead of banning words
Mhm.
altogether
Yeah.
because
And
it
I
just
have
creates
banned
negative.
words, all like they're not allowed to use the word hate,
Mm,
um, and things like that. That was something they were doing a lot, and like they would say it a lot about things or people or their other
mm,
home situation, and so it was just too much. And
mm-hmm.
so we said we can't say that word anymore.
Yeah, and
Um,
that's definitely like like how you use the word too. Like how
yeah,
are you using
yeah.
it? How often? So yeah, I definitely
Mhm.
agree with that.
Yeah. So anyway, so with that story, so she was complaining about that. I'm like, okay, so at your other home, if you go swimming, like I know how well of a swimmer she is, and I'm qualified, and I know they go to pools where there's other lifeguards, so I know she's safe. First off, and so I said, if you wanted to, you could take off your life jacket and jump into the deep end and show your other mom that you know how to swim. And but know that she's not me and your dad, and might not like it, and you might get in trouble and you might have a consequence in that home. But if you want to, you can make your own choices. And so she ended up doing that, and she came back to our house super excited, and she's like, I did it, I did it, I didn't get in trouble.
Hey.
So it's really funny, but I'm like, that's kind of along the lines of like you get to test your boundaries.
Yeah.
And the kids always make fun of me because they're like, oh, you're a rule breaker. And I'm like, well, yes, I am a rule breaker, but I never do it where it's going to hurt someone.
Mm-hmm.
And I also know that if there's a consequence, I'm responsible for that consequence for me breaking the rules. And so again, like I'm not of like I don't love the government. I don't love like all the different things, you know what I mean? So I'm not going to follow everything, and I don't want to be a sheep. And so I want to teach the kids that too. And so that comes along with it. Um so anyways, that's just a funny story of her not being a sheep and wearing the life jacket that she absolutely hates.
Yeah, and I mean, to be honest, like teaching kids to have a mind of their own and follow rules, like all of these things, like all of the concepts that we have talked about today, there is such a fine line between,
Yes.
like, example, arrogance and narcissism compared to
Mhm.
self-confident. Like
Yeah.
that's the same concept. It's like there's a fine line with all of this stuff. And
Mhm.
the thing that I've learned, and we've had the same mentor teach us this, but the concept of right, wrong, good, bad, if
Mhm.
you can let that go and instead go, is this effective or is this ineffective? And how
Mhm.
that thought process alone can actually help
Yeah.
you create a more effective experience for yourself
Yeah.
instead of going, oh, this is good, or oh, this is bad, or
Mhm.
oh, that's so wrong, why would they do that? And instead ask, well, is it effective that they
Mhm.
treated someone like that, or is that ineffective that they treated
Yeah.
someone like that, instead of going, oh, they're
Mhm.
just such a bad person.
Yeah.
Like there's a different
Mhm.
frequency that goes along with saying something like that, and it's less judgmental. I know when I hear somebody say, oh, that person was so wrong, like
Mhm.
there's like this, oh man, that person's a little bit judgy. Like, oh God, like
Yeah.
I've done that before, like you
Mhm.
feel a little bit judged in that moment if you overhear someone say, oh, it was so wrong for them to do XYZ. And you're like, oh crap, I've done that before. You feel
Yeah.
immediately judged. But
Yeah.
when you say something like, well, that was effective or ineffective, it's like,
Yeah.
okay, yeah,
Yeah.
maybe it was ineffective for me to do XYZ. Yeah, probably
Yeah.
not a good idea. I won't do that again. So
Yeah.
it's a
Well,
fine
and that's
line.
something that the school has started doing this year. So I've worked
Cool.
in their school, volunteering for 3 years, actually employed for 2 years, just like a little part-time 1 hour a day thing. And so this year, I've only noticed it this year. It might have been a thing last year. I don't believe so. But they say to kids that was unexpected behavior. So it
Interesting.
wasn't bad, it wasn't wrong, it was unexpected. So they have expected behavior is
Hmm.
being kind and not talking while your teacher's talking, and like keeping your hands to yourself, like all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So they have a list of expected behavior and a list of unexpected behavior,
Hmm.
and it's not unacceptable, it's unexpected.
Yeah.
And I think that's really cool. And so they'll be like, okay, that was unexpected behavior, and so now we need to do this. And so it's
Interesting.
along the same lines of that effective and ineffective. So I like it a lot better too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because like you do grow up, and I think of like my childhood, you grow up going, "Oh, I'll be such a bad person if I do that." And then later in life, you end up doing it and you're like, "What the hell?" Like using the F word. Like I was like, "Oh, I can't do that. That's
Yeah.
so derogatory." And then as life went on, I was like, wait a minute, like there can be a time and a place for things too.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
understanding that time and place and having your own mind and thinking that through, like
Mhm.
that's huge. And to have that as a kid, to have that
Mhm.
understanding as a kid instead of, oh no, you can't do that. Like, for example, I was always taught, and you probably were too, because you were in the Mennonite church, like abstinence until you get
Mhm.
married. Like, do not
Yeah.
have sex until you get married.
Mhm.
Now I look at that rule and I'm like, God damn, that created a lot of trauma in and of itself.
Yeah.
Instead of going, is it effective or ineffective for you to
Mhm.
have sex before marriage? Like,
Yeah.
think about like
Well,
with your daughter, the consequences
mhm.
of positive or negative consequences that might happen as a result.
Yeah. Well, so there's so many things that I can talk about my life and the kids' life with that like
Yeah.
sex topic. I waited until I was married to have sex the first time.
Same. Yeah.
And definitely not no more.
Yeah. I mean, I'm happily married to the man that I waited to have sex with. So
Yeah.
I'm grateful for how things worked out,
Yeah.
but I would never do it again. And I've told him that. He's told me that too. He's
Yeah.
like, oh no, that was the worst.
But I also don't want my kids sleeping around in high school either.
Right. Yeah.
So I didn't sleep around in high school, and I am so grateful, like
Same.
so grateful.
Same.
So it's a hard thing.
Yeah.
I was talking to another one of my friends who has experienced some sexual trauma, and
Mm,
she actually might be a great person to include sometime. And she's still Christian, very religious, very active in the church, and she was talking about how she does not want her daughters to wait until they're married,
mm,
and she also does not want her daughters to be for the first person that they have a sexual experience with to be someone else. And I
mm,
was like, I never even thought of that. But that, like, because like a lot of boys masturbate just naturally, like my boys definitely do.
mm.
Like, and or I guess I don't think it's masturbation at this point. They
Yeah.
just like to play with their penis. And
What boy
so
doesn't?
and they like to be naked, and I'm like, okay, I don't want to see that. So, and again, I don't want to shame them. I don't want to
Right.
body shame them or masturbate shame them. And so it's like, okay, if you want to play with your penis, you have to go and lay in your bed or go into the bathroom. Like,
Mm.
it's not happening in the living room or the kitchen. That's actually
Yeah.
one of them this morning. Go put on underwear for breakfast because I don't want to see it.
Nope.
So yeah. And yeah. So then, but for I never masturbated as a kid ever. Teenager, anything like that.
I
Not until I
did.
was,
Ha!
yeah.
Oh yeah, girl.
So and but I don't know if that's common for like young girls or teenagers as much as boys. I don't
I
know, maybe
mean,
it was
they
just
say
me.
it's not, but I also think that there's a lot of shame around it. So it makes
Yeah.
me wonder if there's a lot of curiosity around it, but like there's
Yeah.
so much shame for women to explore their bodies that
Yeah.
it's like, oh no, I can't do that. And so they shut
Yeah.
it down. For me,
Yeah.
I was just really curious and I was like, well, that's interesting. So,
That's
I mean,
fair.
that did create a lot of shame for me, but I was like,
Mhm.
well, whatever. Here we are. I've
Yeah.
already done it.
Well,
So,
for sure. Yeah. And so for her, I want that too. Like what my friend said, I was like, I never even thought of that, but I want her to know her body and touch
yeah.
her body herself before someone else does.
Mm,
Like that just makes sense. That definitely wasn't the situation for me.
mm.
So yeah.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. No, I mean, I guess I've never really thought about that, like teaching
yeah.
women to do that. Like, I mean,
Mhm.
I don't know that I would just go out and be like, hey, do this, but I mean, guess maybe you
No,
can. I don't know.
I don't know. I haven't got there yet, but
Yeah, that I mean, kids, this is hard. Like, what
yeah.
do you teach kids?
And
Yeah.
and with everything that's going on right now, like my daughter has brought up like lesbian, bisexual,
Yeah.
transgender, gender fluid, like all of those things she's brought up to me and talked to me about that. And it's like, okay, so like that sex conversation, that masturbation conversation is right around the corner with those topics.
Yeah.
And I know people that started having that conversation with their kids forever ago.
Hmm.
Like they like some people say as young as soon as they could, like that's like your penis and your vagina, that's what happens. Like
Right.
um and I know some people have started around the grade 2 age, and some people, like my parents, never talked to me about it. And
Mm-mm.
so
Yeah.
um I have no idea, but yeah.
Yeah, no, it's just yeah, it's interesting that as a culture, we are we feel so shameful about something that
Yeah.
was literally beautiful. Like
Yeah.
we feel so shameful about our
Mhm.
bodies, and it's just
Yeah.
kind of a
Mhm.
that's where the whole you complimenting your kids every night before bed, like
Mhm.
that creates less of that shame, which is awesome.
Yeah.
Obviously,
Well, you even sorry.
no, I mean, what I was going to say is obviously, like, no matter who you are, you're going to have some sort of trauma in your life.
Mhm. Oh, for sure.
It's just one of those things that we as humans have to work through. But
Mhm.
I mean, less shame is nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, for sure. And that was something too, like, so two things. We really tell the kids, like, just don't lie to us, like
Yeah.
be honest with us. Like you'll have consequences maybe, but if you're lying, that there's
Yeah.
no coming back from that.
Yeah.
So like just be upfront and honest, and we will work with you, we will have your back, and no matter what you do, we will always love you. And so just keep open dialogue. If we don't know that you don't like something, that will never change. And that's something too, like my daughter has asked me to talk to her bio mom about things that she doesn't like, because she doesn't like having those conversations.
Mm.
And um and so she would rather me tell her that. And I'm like, okay, but then
Mm.
when she asks you about that, you need to have those conversations and be honest. And so oh, where was I going to go with that? And yeah, so Derek was like, well, I think it's important for her to learn to have those conversations. I'm like, yes, this is kind of like a progression. Eventually, I won't do that for her.
No. Yeah.
But her first step is when she's asked, because when she has told me that she'll be asked by her bio mom, like, is this true? This is what Ashley told me. And she'll say no. And I'm like, if I am going to speak your truth for you, you have to be honest.
Hmm.
Otherwise, I'm not doing it. And
Right.
so I'm like, that's going to be her first step. And then we'll progress from there. Um, and so, yeah, that thing is completely gone about being honest, that thought process. But
It's
then
okay.
also with body shaming, like nakedness, a lot of people are like, oh my gosh, like your kids can't see you naked. Like once they're 5 years old, it's inappropriate and wrong and all that kind of stuff. And like they're my stepkids,
Right.
and they see me naked.
Mm.
All three of my kids have given me hugs while I'm going to the bathroom. Like there's no
Yep.
shame
Yep.
whatsoever. They see me doing coffee enemas and they ask me, "Oh, are you putting coffee up your bum right now?" Yep, I
Yep.
am.
That's what's
Like,
happening.
and they walk around naked. And I only tell them they have to go put on clothes if they're touching themselves
Mm.
or go to their room. That's or if they're sitting on the couch. Like if they go to sit on the couch, I'm like, no, 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 we're
Yeah.
gonna
No
you
naked butts on the couch, please.
yeah.
Yeah. No
So like
thanks.
those are the only things. And to me, it's all about just openness and not sexualizing things. Like, because a naked body is only sexualized in our culture, really. Like you go to Europe and every female's topless, and
Yeah.
like there's statues of naked people everywhere.
Yeah.
Like nakedness should not be sexual and it should not be shamed.
Yeah.
And I think the best way to keep my kids from like tons of like sex and tons of pornography, which both of them I don't think are the healthiest things in the world. some people disagree, but to me, that's a no-go in my world. I think the biggest thing to do that is for them not to be like, ooh, like boobies, you know?
Yeah. No,
And that's something
exactly.
yeah,
Yeah.
sorry, that's a conversation I've had with one of my friends who is um kind of on the lines of like not gender neutral, but he is bisexual, and like he has a lot to do with like the LGBTQ community, and he said like the biggest thing to make your kids feel safe is to not shame them into anything,
Mm-hmm.
and then they're not going to be like, ooh, like I need to go get all like up in this, like drugs,
Yeah.
alcohol, sex, whatever,
Mm-hmm.
as a young teen or young adult, because it's not something that you ever like shamed or said this is bad, or like, you know what I mean?
Right.
So
Yeah. I mean, my example for that is as a kid. So my mom came directly from Germany, right? So like she has a lot of European roots, and as
mhm,
a kid, she was given alcohol, and as a child, I was given alcohol. I think maybe 12 years old, they would be like, "Oh, it's Christmas. Here, have some wine." Like
mhm,
that created a special place for alcohol. So when I turned 21, I didn't go bananas. I was just like, "Oh, yeah, it's here." Like I that
yeah,
had created like this healthy respect for it where it
yeah,
was like, "Oh, like it's great. I
mhm,
have tried it before though." So it wasn't like, "Oh, I
yeah,
got to go out and I got to go get slammed," you know? Like it
yeah,
created that healthy respect. So I
mhm,
think that when you can introduce stuff like that, that it does create, like you said, it creates that respect for it instead of
mhm,
shame around doing that. So,
yeah,
yeah.
for
So,
sure.
with that, man, we talked about a lot of stuff. We were not planning on that. Let's just say that
So
right now.
we might
But
have to have like a part two because it was like all over the place.
I know, for real. Like, I hope everybody wasn't like, whoa, what are they? They're talking about that now? What in the world?
Yeah, exactly.
But that's how our brains go. That's how our conversations go in general. So,
Yes,
with that,
definitely.
yeah, with that, I guess we'll call this one a wrap for TMI advice you didn't want. There might be advice in here that you didn't want, but hey, you got it. You're welcome.
Yeah,
So, but with that, can't wait to hang out with everyone next time where we talk about more TMI stuff.
definitely.